This is my least favorite question that I guess asked all the time is what is steampunk? And I think fortunately I don't really need to tell you all what steampunk is. My name is Margaret Killjoy, and I founded Steampunk Magazine a number of years ago that I don't remember, 2007 or something. And I ran it for about 5 issues, and then passed on the editorship to a woman named Allegra who lives in the UK. So most of my experience with steampunk has been in being an editor of Steampunk Magazine, and then also I'm a writer, and wrote a book called Steampunk's Guide to the Apocalypse, and a fiction book called What Lies Beneath the Clock Tower that's about to come out. And I guess the easiest way for me to talk about what steampunk is punks in 19th century attire. I don't know. I guess I got really into it from the idea of like if you took street punks and put them in Victorian England and Victorian New York and things like that. And that's how I first got really introduced to it. And then as steampunk kind of blossomed as a community, I recognized that that wasn't the entirety of what was going on. But it's okay because there's still room for us. So, yeah.
Hi, my name is Ekaterina Sedia, and I'm a writer. One of my books was sort of classified as a steampunk. It's called The Alchemy of Stone. And this particular one does not really take place in Victorian England. And my next book is Heart of Iron, and it doesn't take place in Victorian England either. Which basically, in a roundabout way, brings me to my idea of steampunk. Is really, sort of on the most simple level, you can talk about what early development of complex technologies would do for human history. And it is especially interesting to me in context of colonialism. Oftentimes, and like somewhat glibly, when asked what steampunk is, I just say that it's the illusion of painless progress. Basically, we get to play around with historical tropes without having to deal with the fallout of the Industrial Revolution, which is never pretty. And so steampunk is really kind of an opportunity, I think, for writers to sort of speculate and think about if Industrial Revolution went differently, if those technologies were available to different kinds of people. What would happen then, and would technology be able to uplift rather than oppress? And this is really my interest, and this is what I tend to write about. Not to say that there are like no airships or chases or exciting stuff happening as well.
I'm Jaymee. As you can see, I'm kind of loopy this morning. I am actually based in Hamilton, Ontario, where I attend McMaster University. I am a master's candidate for Cultural Studies and Critical Theory program there. And my project is on post-colonialism and steampunk. So I write a blog called Silver Goggles. And what I do is I kind of like look at the steampunk aesthetic, which is, I don't consider steampunk as like, oh, it's a kind of literature, it's a kind of subgenre, it's a kind of subculture, because it's all of these things, and the only thing they really have in common, taking a leaf from Mike Pershaw, the steampunk scholar, is that it's a shared aesthetic that is techno-fantastic, and that's anachronism, and it's evocative of the 19th century, but really, for me, it's kind of evocative of kind of a high industrial tech and kind of a low resource sort of setting. So what I do is I think through how we can use the steampunk aesthetic as a way to kind of interrogate what we know of history to bring forward more post-colonial narratives or the histories that aren't really noticed in most history textbooks of today. Right? Because the histories that we generally know tend to be more like Eurocentric, tends to be the history of civilization is the history of Western civilization, particularly in a more modern context. So what I do is I kind of interrogate that, the effect of this ideal of westernization and how it has impacted colonized peoples, and how these marginalized peoples can use this aesthetic to kind of like bring themselves forward a lot more and have their own stories. My name is Ay-Leen The Peacemaker. I am the founding editor of Beyond Ekaterina, which is a blog of multicultural steampunk. And the mission statement of the blog, basically, we've already talked a little bit about reclaiming histories, the non-pretty side of the Industrial Revolution, and my blog particularly addresses that as well. The mission statement of it is reclaiming those lost histories. So it's a focus on marginalized voices. So in doing so, the blog's content is all about how the West engages with the non-West, the focus on marginalized peoples, whether it is racial, whether it is gender identification or ability, and otherwise in Western histories, and particularly highlighting how multicultural steampunk manifests itself in the community today. So it's edited by myself, but I also have contributors from around the world. Jaymee has been a contributor. I also have writers that had come from Italy, from Bulgaria, from Nigeria. Yes, Nigeria. It's obviously an international, multiracial, multi-ethnic platform where the marginalized voice has the chance to speak about what it really means to live in a multicultural world and how that can affect our steampunk community.
Hi, I'm Jake Von Slatt, and I've been interested in the history of science and the history of technology, and specifically the Industrial Revolution, since I was a very young kid. When I think I was 13 or 14, my parents took us on a canal boat vacation in England, and the canal system in England was built starting in the late 1700s and into the 1800s, and it was sort of the backbone on which the British Industrial Revolution was built. And all the canals have been converted for recreational use, but they still go through the parts of the country that were core to that Industrial Revolution. I got exposed to where this all happened, and found it fascinating and very interesting, and very shortly thereafter discovered James Burke's Connection series, which was a BBC series about he would take a modern piece of technology and trace the developments that made that possible back through history, and some of those developments were really surprising and really interesting. It also helped that my father taught history of science at the college level. So this is something that infected me from a very young age, and it was something that I wanted to get down and dirty and actually make some of this stuff that I had seen. So I've been making this sort of 19th century looking stuff for most of my life, and then maybe about 4 or 5 years ago discovered that it was called steampunk, so I started putting the label steampunk on the stuff that I made, and lots of people seem to agree with me, and that's how I got here. So I'm primarily a maker, but I work in the steampunk aesthetic.
I am Joe Marsace. I'm the proprietor of Dr. Grimm Laboratories. I too am a maker, prop maker, and also author, co-author of the 1000 Steampunk Creations with my lovely wife, Allison de Blasio, also my business partner. We also are the co-authors together of How to Draw Steampunk, which is coming out later this year. My background is actually as a theme park designer, and I too got into steampunk way before I knew there was a title for it. When I was a kid, I was a huge fan of Jules Verne and particularly Mary Shelley's work, so I've always designed in that kind of style. I was one of the lead designers in the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea attraction that's at Tokyo Seas Disney currently. And then several years later, I was approached and said, "Oh, you're a steampunk artist," and I had no idea what they meant, but evidently I was once I looked it up. So I just kind of ran with it, and then Dr. Grimm Laboratories has kind of spawned out of the character Dr. Grimm, which I attribute most of my machines to. The machines that I built, which are brain-driven, brains in jars that are interactive machines that talk, and based on an astute history of several different historical people like Amelia Earhart, Edgar Allan Poe. So I build machines that are props and such for museum exhibits. I host an annual art exhibit that I run out of Hartford called the Steampunk Bazaar. And that's really kind of my place in all of this, is bringing artists together and networking and putting together this show and these books. Because to me, steampunk is, it's an art movement. It's all stemming from, both history and literature, and then throw into science and how it all tied together to make this world that we come to celebrate this weekend. So it's been interesting to me to see how it's evolving, especially in the art world, where some people look at it as a craft, and some people who do this and make these characters and these weapons, and they don't consider themselves artists at all. And I kind of bring them into my realm, and those people, even if they don't think they're artists, I find them and I find their work intriguing and invite them to be in my shows or in these books and kind of celebrate what they do. Which is very important to the world that we're in right now. I mean, there's a lot of people who take this very seriously, but I think that the main thing for me is having fun with it, which is what I do. So a lot of the work that I do is kind of tongue-in-cheek, especially as Dr. Grimm, which when I'm as the character, you'll probably meet me out on the floor and I'll be a completely different person. But for here, I will keep it under my hat and just be Joey and celebrate this awesome book that has so many different versions of what steampunk is to everyone. I think the most important thing that I take from it is that steampunk, there is no true definition. If you ask anybody here, that each one will have their own definition of what steampunk is, and that's because steampunk, as the movement that it is as unique as the person who designs it.